Welcome to DonaldWaugh.com, and I hope you all are having a fantastic day. This video, we're going to be taking a look at mixing drums actually. Quite a few of you have been texting me and commenting that you'd like to see more mixing videos. A little tutorial on how to get the sounding nice and clean and delicious. Well, I'm answering that call, and I'm going to do that video just for you guys. So check out this next one. It's going to be sweet. So we're gonna start mixing drums, but before we go into mixing the drums, I'm gonna allow you to listen to the track with EQ already on, EQ and compression, and then I'm gonna take away the EQ and compression so you can hear the difference, and then I'm gonna show you exactly how I get to where I got to. All right, so let's take a listen. So this one is with EQ and compression. And now without. And now I'm going to allow you to hear just the drums with EQ and compression so you can hear that contrast. It's a solo. Without. With. Without. So you can hear a drastic change in the sound. So let's go into how we get to the point where it sounds really super cool. So let me just set this up here. Perfect. For pretty much every single instrument, I always put a high pass filter. What I find when you add a high pass filter, it gets rid of that low, muddy sounding frequency, say in the 20 hertz, 30, even up to even 40 hertz, right? Depending on the style of music you're doing. But getting that muddy, rumbly sound, getting rid of it from the beginning is a good idea. All right, why do I put it on the very beginning of my chain, even before the gate? I find when you send that low frequency through the gate actually isn't as effective. All right, so I'm listening to the bass drum. All right. Then I'm gonna add that filter on. If you notice that right at the end there, that low frequency, don't need it, especially when you're listening through certain speakers. You're not going to hear it anyway. So we're going through that gate. Now you're hearing just the bass drum. That gate is working. So let me turn off the filter. Back on. I find with the filter, it's almost like that frequency even gets punchier when it's not there. And so the gate, I set my attack very, very fast. So I'm setting that 0 milliseconds because I find, listen to it with a fast attack, you will hear it for yourself. So that's a fast attack. Let me show you what happens when I make the attack slower, and listen to the changes as I make the attack much slower. Listen. See what happened there? So that point of impact becomes mush when the attack is too slow. So you want the fastest attack for bass drum and pretty much drums in particular. I find I wouldn't recommend compressing cymbals, not necessary, but if you have to, I'd say a slow, because you want that shimmer sound. But for bass drum, snare, toms, you want the impact, that you want the attack pretty much. So you want your attack super fast. Hold your and release. You're gonna have to dial in those depending on your threshold. So depending on the impact, the loudness of the instrument, those things are gonna be more subjective. Yeah. So that I won't be able to tell you exactly, but what I did here for my bass drum, in terms of decibels of threshold, it's minus 25, and my hold at 80, 86, 87 millihertz, release at 118, milliseconds, hold 86 milliseconds, all right? So, of course, that's going to be subjective to your instrument, right? Let's move on to the EQ. For the low frequency, of course, I still put a high pass filter. I hate that frequency that much. A second high pass filter. Oh yes. Can't have too many of those. Okay, so for the low frequency, I'm boosting 160 hertz at 4 decibels. So quite a bit of boosting there. I want that thickness, so I'm gonna really accentuate it. And to get it even thicker, check this out. This mid frequency here, that one, actually get rid of it. It actually makes the bass drum even more focused. All right, so I'm reducing it. Man, I even go as much as 7 or 8 decibels of say 460 hertz, right? And so my Q is relatively narrow Q. It's almost like a V shape for the Q. And for my high frequency, I'd say 15K, I'm boosting I'd say 6 decibels to kind of get back that click sound. That's a sound you're gonna get in small speakers, especially people who are listening on their phones. For it to hear the bass drum, you're not gonna hear the bass drum if you're just boosting low frequencies. People with smaller speakers won't be able to hear them. It's just physics. So you want to boost high frequencies as well. So if you're listening in a club setting, you can hear those big, heavy, low and low mid frequencies. And if you're listening on small speakers, you can also hear it. How I compress it, my attack is a very fast attack. My release is fairly fast, but not too fast. I still want the gain reduction, but if you make that release too slow, I find when the bass drum hits and then the second note comes, it's gonna reduce that even lower. So it's not gonna sound like, say, human beings playing. I want the dynamics. Let me just give you an example of that. So with my release, check it out. Look at the gain reduction. Super slow, right? But when I make a much faster release, look at that. It's grabbing each one, so it's very dynamic, which is perfect, right, for your compression. And for my final plug-in in the chain, I add a limiter. So that kind of get rid of the peaks, so there's no clipping, and keep things nice and clean. And that's the bass drum. All right, let's take a listen to the snare. With the snare, you're gonna find it looks similar in terms of how I EQ it to the bass drum. Similar, but obviously not the same. For my filter, high pass, of course, we'll talk about that. Going into our gate. With this, in this case, my gate's not even working. I tried putting a gate on it, and I didn't like it was grabbing all my ghost notes if you listen. See, there are a lot of ghost notes that I would lose. So I'm saying, nah, let me use EQ to isolate the sound instead of a gate. Or in some cases, you can even go into and edit that audio and literally cut out things you don't want. Not going to do that today. Then we're going to move on to our EQ. Of course, we're going to get rid of some more of or unpleasant low frequency sound for a snare, we're going to isolate that. And the good thing about getting rid of those low end is going to get rid of some of the bass drum that's being leaked into the snare mic. So I find getting that high pass and really scooping it in. So I'm getting down to 130 hertz, right? So I'm really digging in and getting out of those, getting the low end out there. So when I play it without that EQ, it sounds way more exciting because I'm boosting, say, mid frequency, say about 300 hertz. I'm scooping out a bit of that nasally between, say, 6 to 800 hertz for the snare. For my particular snare, obviously, this will respond differently to the way you tune your snare. I like to tune my snare fairly low, so it's in the mids, even sometimes low mid frequency. I really detune my snare. I get a nice beefy sounding snare. And of course, I'm boosting high end, so I'm boosting in the 20K. Unfortunate thing about boosting in the 20K, you're going to boost a bit of your hi-hat. So keep that in mind. But you're going to get a really nice, exciting snare. The thing to offset the hi-hat, you just simply bring down some of those high end if you don't want such a sizzly hi-hat. All right, so we're going to move on to our hi-hats. All right, so let's take a listen. All right, so with our hi-hat, let us talk about it. So with a hi-hat, if you notice, I'm only using EQ, and my high-pass filter is really, really drastic. So I'm scooping away a chunk all the way up to 265 hertz. Right away, I'm in the snare realm. I'm cutting even into the snare a little bit. Of course, I've chopped a chunk out of the bass drum, so we're not really hearing the bass drum as much. Almost at all. Listen. All right, let's see. So this is with it, nice and bright, without. All right. So of course, with that, the hi-hat microphone, it's the way it was positioned, the type of microphone it is. It's going to block out some of the bass drum a bit. It's not going to pick up that frequency. But just to make sure you scoop it away, get rid of it. You don't need it, right? And you're going to make it nice and clean. I'm boosting, say, as I said before, in my snare, I boosted the 20K. I'm boosting about 20K here also. I personally like a very sizzly hi-hat. I'm from Jamaica, so a lot of engineers like their hi-hat nice and sizzly. Of course, if you don't like it, you just bring it down, and make it nice and warm. But for this particular song, I can deal with a nice sizzly hi-hat, and even to make it even more high end, I'm scooping out a good 12 kilohertz of here. I'm scooping at 9 decibels, almost 10. Wow, that's some serious scoop. Let me play it. So I'm going to add it back. I'm going to boost it. That sound. Nah, I don't like. All right, so about there. Or even there. So I find if you want a nice smooth hi-hat sound, I find getting rid of that frequency, for me, it kind of makes a hi-hat just sound a lot more smooth. I like a smooth sound. I'm a kind of smooth operator. Anyway, now let's take a look at the tom. All right, so tom 1. Let's find one in the mix, and we can. So that's a tom. So if you notice with the tom, when I play the tom, it's triggering. Actually, my bass drum is actually also triggering the tom too. The room, it's very live, so you're gonna hear the boom and that sound. It's not pretty. So what I do to get rid of that sound, EQ. All right, so let me show you how I kind of get rid of that sound. So let's play it. All right, with that, obviously, I'm going to put my high pass. We don't have to even discuss that anymore. we know that it's on there. For the gate, I like to put a gate. Some people like to go in and edit out the stuff that they don't want, right? So let's play it. All right. I know what you're saying. That tom is super short now and almost lifeless. We're gonna add the life right back to it with reverb. Some people say that's cheating, but it works and nobody notices. When it's in the mix, believe me, it's gonna sound boom and beautiful when you add that trail with artificial trail with reverb. All right, so of course I'm gonna boost those mid frequencies. So we're back in the between say the 250 to the 350, even 400 hertz range. So right here I'm boosting, let's see what I'm boosting here. I'm boosting 214. All right, so I'm a little bit in the low mid section there. So I'm at mid range and we're boost. That's where toms general, that would be a 10-inch tom, I believe. So that's generally where it lives. So I'm boosting that frequency a bit if you listen. And I'm also boosting 15 kilohertz on the high end to give it that sizzle. Always add that sizzle back, you know. And I like to get rid of the high mids, the nasally sound in the tom to give it that round punchy sound. To really bring it up now, I'm gonna compress it. I'm kind of going through fairly quickly now because it's pretty much, you kind of see the trend of what's going on here. The attack and the release is very similar to the bass drum and the snare. Gain reduction. Right, so that's a tom, and I always slap a little limiter on there to kind of keep things nice and contained so there's no clipping. All right, and pretty much all the toms are about the same, so I won't bore you with. If you notice with the EQ, it's gonna get lower as it goes. So move on to the next EQ. You see, as we go to say tom 3, and let's go to tom 4, EQ is gonna be a little different. All right, so that's the only major differences. Of course, with the gate, you're gonna adjust the threshold a little bit different in terms of how it enters the gate and how much is entering the gate. But in terms of your attack, it's gonna be the shortest attack possible, right? In my case, 0 milliseconds. And for your overheads, it's very similar to the hi-hat in terms of how I EQ it. Not the same, similar. I personally, for this song, sometimes you want your overheads to pick up your bass drum and your snare. You want it to color them. In this particular song and the style, I find I don't want that. I want to isolate my bass drum and have it sounding super punchy. I don't want any room sound at all. So in that case, I use my high pass filter and I'm going to literally cut it all the way up. Right. So of course it's going to grab the snare and it's going to color the snare a little bit. But I'm going to boost those highs and get it nice and shimmery sounding. Similar for my auxiliary hi-hat. For my snare, my auxiliary snare, which is a tiny 8-inch snare, I have to approach it a little bit different than my 14-inch, and I detune that snare also. But for my 8-inch, it's super high. So there's certain frequencies I'm gonna have to boost to get it sounding decent. Right. So if you notice, the EQ curve on the auxiliary snare is a little bit different, but everything else is more or less similar. All right, for my cowbell, which was on my left leg, playing here. Let me make you hear it. Go through these real quick. I could have scooped away way more than that. It wouldn't matter, but it's on all of them, so it doesn't matter. With and I'm talking about the filter here. For the gate, for the gate, I could have gone a little bit more drastic, like that. I'll probably keep it that way. All right, fine. So I can isolate that EQ. So right away I can go and let me turn off EQ. More EQ. So kind of boosting that right there. And of course, high frequency. Kind of make it shine. Whoopsies. Let's bring that back. All right. Matter of fact, there you go. For gain reduction, just a tad bit. I don't want it too much for the compressor to really work too hard on that cowbell. So a tiny bit of gain red just to keep it nice and even, consistent. And of course, my limiter at the end of the chain, just in case I step on that cowbell too hard and it's peaking. So keep everything nice and in line. So let's listen to the whole kit and see what it sounds like. So that is it, and let's hear the song. All right, so it's not too hard. It's fairly simple to get your drums sounding nice and clean, nice and tidy, and that's exciting just by virtue of EQs, compressors, and of course there's lots more you can do to really enhance the sound. You can add modulators on snares. You can change the pitch using software. Of course, you can add reverb, delays to really get really artistic, really interesting in how you mix the drum. But this is a very simple way of getting the sound ready and for the listener to really enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching. Please go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, like on Facebook, or follow us on the web at donaldwaugh.com.